Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. Right, so I'm Becky, and as Catherine was saying, I'm a learning and development partner at NG Bailey, and I'm actually responsible for our leadership programs for first-line managers, and also our e-learning content and platform.
I'm Jennifer Clare, and I've been working in NG Bailey for 3 years as a business performance partner, and I've been working with Becky on the leadership programme that we're here to talk to you about today. We're intending to make this a bit of an interactive session towards the end, so we've got about 15 minutes to cover the slides, and then after that we're going to open up to you to talk to us about our experience and how we went about doing things, and maybe ask some more questions about what we're going to share with you. So hopefully you will have some questions prepared. So first of all, NG Bailey, we're a construction organisation, and we deliver, our purpose is to build sustainable buildings. So we deliver technical solutions for the whole life of a building, from electrical design and installation right through to long-term facilities maintenance. And we do that through 3 divisions: engineering, facility services and IT services. So the conversations that we've already had today about engineers and how they can be quite difficult to drag along the change journey, I can definitely relate to some of that. We've got quite a challenging growth plan over the next 5 years, and with that brings a need for us to be much clearer about our expectations for competence and behaviour, and specifically in terms of leadership competence. And our operational performance is high on the agenda, which created the need for us to develop our framework, which we called our DNA. So our DNA brings together behavioural and technical competencies, and I developed this while I was also working with the managing director and his senior leadership team. We were working on developing them professionally, developing their leadership competence, and at the same time we were defining what would be in our behavioural and technical competencies in a new framework. And this was where we first introduced Lumina to the organisation. Our behavioural competencies have been mapped against Lumina Spark qualities. So ideally what we were looking to do was to develop the culture, and this meant that we did have a tendency for the engineers and the managers in the business to be quite red-blue, as we've already discussed today. And so the idea was to enable them to understand the value of being more diverse and appreciating what a green and yellow personality can bring to the table. And then also, in order for us to develop that further in the organisation, it was important that it was there throughout the competency framework. So, for example, influence, our influence behavioural competency, covers sociable, logical and collaborative. And what this means is that employees can map, they can then do a Lumina Spark portrait, and then they can understand what their development strengths are and what their development needs are, but then they can also map that to the performance competencies and the requirements in the business.
So while Jennifer was developing the DNA, I was actually working on a project to look at developing our first-line managers' leadership capability. The business recognised that traditionally we promoted or recruited people managers based on technical skill and performance rather than the ability to lead and manage their people, which takes a whole different set of skills if you think about it. And this was all actually backed up, and we had evidence for this through focus groups that we completed through an engagement project, feedback from customers, and also low scores in our engagement communication kind of part of the questionnaire, and also through our project and focus groups that we did for fairness, inclusion and respect. And I also looked at what was on offer in terms of development and support to help our managers lead and manage their people. And what was kind of available was sparse, but also it wasn't available to all. So at that point, Jennifer and I actually got together and met and started talking about our projects. And it became very clear that Lumina Spark would need to play a big part in actually developing our leadership programme. And so we decided to put Lumina Spark and the DNA into our leadership programme. So we called our leadership programme LEAP, and it stands for Leadership, Engagement and Performance. And since 2007, we've been rolling it out to support this growth plan. And today, we're just going to take you through how we developed the programme and also some of the challenges that we faced along the way. So during the design phase, we identified 3 key development areas. So the people skills, so the how our managers interact with people. So in particular, adapting and connecting with others. And then also the behaviours such as taking ownership, self-awareness, the courage to tackle issues, and also the concern for others. And then also the knowledge, so around the what, how do, the people management processes, the legislation around employment law and things like that. So all those 3 were really important in terms of the development. And so we created the programme to be a blended approach, so a mixture of kind of face-to-face learning, but also e-learning as well. And this was all to address these needs, but also to address the challenge of having managers up and down the country, with a large geographic spread. And also, they weren't willing to kind of come out of the business for long periods of time. So we created that blended approach. And another challenge that we had was we had 3 divisions with 3 senior leadership teams, all providing different services. So we needed to make it relevant for all 3, but also we needed to have a consistent approach. And so we developed this programme to help that. So the programme consists of 8 e-learning modules, a 2-day workshop, and online forums. So the 8 e-learning modules are centred around the people processes and employment legislation, and the 2-day workshop is all about behaviours and developing the people skills. Also, the DNA is included in that as well, how to use the DNA. And the online forum is there to keep people connected and supported. And we do a fortnightly post that reminds them about Lumina, how to use it, and how to bring the best out of the learning that they've achieved. And one of the big challenges that we did face was actually traditionally the attendance on workshops wasn't always great. And so we set about really engaging the participants before they came onto the programme through our managing directors sending out communications, explaining why it was important to achieving the growth plan, and also how they would personally benefit from attending. And we also did conference calls as well to give them an opportunity to understand why we developed the programme, how they would personally benefit from it, but also an opportunity to ask questions about filling in the Lumina questionnaire, because you can imagine, that questionnaire was very new to them. As engineers, they were quite suspicious at the beginning. So it's kind of being able to answer those questions, and it did work really well. We had a great attendance rate, hardly any cancellations. So yeah, it was a great success in that regard.
So the 2-day workshop is really where I think we got the majority of the feedback that we've had about the programme has been really positive. And Becky's going to talk a little bit more about that shortly. But the reason why I think we particularly got good feedback for the workshops is because that's the occasion where we get everybody in a room, we get a Lumina mat out, and we really get to weave some magic. And so in the 2-day workshop, we spent the majority of the first day talking about the context for the business and explaining to managers why it's important that they engage and the need for them to engage and adapt in terms of motivating their teams. And then it follows a familiar format that I'm sure you're all used to around introducing the model and getting them to understand their own personality preferences at first. On the second day, we usually find that they've taken their portraits home and they've shared them with friends and family, and so they come back in with some reflections and we give them some time to share that, and then that usually leads to some good healthy debate about how personalities interact and the social dynamics that go on between personalities at a 4-colour lens level. And so then we try to bring the Lumina to life on the second day, and we use actor facilitators. And they take the participants through scenarios and give them chance to have a go at recognising and adapting and applying their learning in a practical setting. And we wrote some scenarios, we designed scenarios with characters that had Lumina qualities that they were able to then recognise and speed read and respond to appropriately, hopefully. But it's all in a safe learning environment where they can get immediate feedback, and we encourage them to reflect on how it went and what they've learned from it.
So we did have some really great feedback, and in terms of the reaction score that we had was 3.7 out of 4 for evaluation. And people particularly liked Lumina, and especially the role plays with actors as well. And traditionally, people don't tend to like, the role play element. And actually, they felt that the actors brought it to life and made it more real. So that really helped. It is notoriously difficult to measure a programme like this, but we did see a 15% rise in performance reviews being completed, which tells us that more managers are having conversations with their people. And participants also reported an average of 24% increase in their ability and confidence in 5 key areas. So the ability to recognise their own communication style, the ability to recognise others' preferences, and adapt and connect with others, and particularly being able to give challenging feedback. And also, we measured around the confidence they had in applying the DNA and actually using the DNA as well. Mm-hmm. So there was some great anecdotal feedback as well that we received as well. And on the back of the success, we did have a request to roll out the programme further to project engineers as well, which really tells us it was a great success. So we're working to embed self-awareness in our business. And a lot of our programmes now, our learning and development programmes, have elements of Lumina tools within it. So we use Spark, we use Emotion, and we use Leader. And we use it in our talent identification and programmes. We use it in our coaching and also our apprenticeship development as well. And John Crosson's here today, our colleague, who is going to be talking to you a little bit more about that element tomorrow on the panel. And then recruitment, I think you've been looking
one of my most recent projects has been to develop our recruitment process to incorporate fundamentally the DNA, but we're also making use of Lumina Spark portraits in order to be able to predict performance potential for candidates. So actually very similar to the work that Julie Ensor has already been doing, we're looking to develop our own, or we have developed our own in-house process around assessing candidates against our DNA, so we can see whether or not people are already likely or able to talk about demonstrating the competencies that we feel are critical to success. So our innovation continues, and there's many other projects that are going on around the business, and we're doing our very best to make sure that people are using Lumina in the best possible way to develop themselves and develop their staff. And this is all totally aligned with our cultural change programme and our growth strategy, as we've already said, which makes it really exciting to see how individuals can use it from a personal development point of view, but also to see how we can obviously reap the benefits as a business as well. So we want to just open up the floor to you, really, to give you some time to ask us some questions about how we've done it or what's been involved in our process, and to share a bit of our experience with you. So I'm happy for you to raise hands if you've got questions. We've got some people with microphones circulating so that we can make sure we can hear you. Any questions? Hi. There's just a microphone heading towards you. Hiya.
Hi. Really good presentation, and it's something that I'm looking at in my organisation. I think in particular the forum I'm interested in, because one of the things I find when I run programmes is the follow-up. So what's been the level of engagement like, and how have you maintained that?
Yeah, so the forum element has been the first time we've used it in the business. And what I would say is we've had minimal people interacting back to us, but we've done surveys to understand whether it's useful, you know, our updates. So people are mainly using it as an update, as a reminder, and we do a fortnightly kind of hints and tips. And what I do is basically look at a portrait, and I'll take sections and then kind of put together a little post, really, and put it up. We've had a few really good kind of interactions where somebody's shared a video, and then I'll share that out. But I wouldn't say we've had a huge amount, if I'm honest.
And when you did your design, did you consider like peer coaching circles as an alternative to the forum?
It's something we encourage, but informally. So during the workshops, we had an element at the end to talk about who else could support you, and that side of things. The challenge around that is managing it. If you make it a formal, is trying to manage it with such a small learning and development function. So we've done kind of what we can with the resources that we've got. But yeah, it's a good point.
I think the other thing to say in relation to that is that in terms of engagement, we really did start with a top-down approach. So we made sure that all the senior managers were invited to taste the sessions. They were all part of forming the content and tailoring the content, so that, as Becky said earlier, we've got 3 different divisions that offer quite different technical services. And so we wanted to make sure that the senior managers in particular, first and foremost, felt like it was all really relevant. Yeah. And so in relation to peer coaching and support away from the classroom, as it were, I think that really formed part of it, because the managers were all engaged, and the way in which it was rolled out, an individual wouldn't go on the programme without their line manager having already attended. So the line manager then really knew the value of that individual and what they were going to get out of it. And hopefully most of them kept a lot of it to themselves and said, you just need to go with an open mind and see what you'll find. And they didn't talk about actors and role plays and all that scary stuff. Yeah. So, but that was definitely really part of the engagement, I think, was making sure the senior managers were on board as well.
Yeah, and we also made sure that all of our HR population became practitioners as well. And we're now starting to encourage them to do team sessions out in the business, so that they're keeping Leap alive and Lumina alive. And so they're now trained as well. So any coaching that goes on, we're really encouraging them to coach around Lumina and use it. So yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Just one down here, yeah.
One of the things I'm thinking about is how much time during the 2 days was spent on Overextended, where the leaders had a chance to let it wash over to them.
Yeah.
this might be them and what they're like and how
Yeah.
they're behaving, what would be the percentage and what was the, when you look at underlying everyday and overextended with the leaders in their engagement and performance, what was the, and the reason I ask is because I'm very interested in finding out when it comes to the leader, understanding that sometimes when they're overextended, this is kind of what they're like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Go on.
I was going to say, formally, we probably did about 10%, you know, in terms of the mat. But definitely informally, you know, with the actors, where you had, so we had a forum part section where 2 actors demonstrated to the group, and the group had to kind of shout out when they, what to do next and things like that. And that definitely brought out some of the overextensions, and it was quite interesting.
Yeah.
With that.
My thought with that is that from our point of view, rolling this out in the organisation, this is for many of the people that attended, this is the very first time that they're being given this kind of portrait, and they're being given a mirror, effectively, to sit and really look at themselves and be open and honest about what it's telling them. So I feel like the time that we did spend with them usually kind of migrated towards them thinking about overextended behaviour rather than anything else, because it was the thing that was probably more apparent to them once they started to be honest with themselves about what it was saying. I think the conversations generally tend to lead in that direction anyway. But we're actually in the process of designing a second phase of workshops, because I feel like we need to continue to get them back in the room and talk to them again. They will have gone away and hopefully done a lot of reflection and learning. And in the second phase of workshops now, I think we'll start to be able to prod a little bit more with overextensions.
Thank you. And so you didn't put anything around the Lumina portrait on the e-learning. That was all knowledge of what they had to capture, is that? 'Cause that's what set
It
up
was
there.
knowledge, and then in each e-learning module we had one section that was about communication and reflecting back on Lumina. So in each of the 8, I was conscious that we needed a reminder so that it was continuously, and it was things like saying, you know, remember, you know, doing the Lumina portrait, and here's some extra videos to watch to remind yourself, and things like that. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, thank you.
Thanks. So I love that you did a process, awful processes rather than the one-off workshops, which a lot of us have to do sometimes. Yeah. So I wanted to know, other than your performance management engagement, how are you measuring that your leaders, in fact, are executing these competencies? And I mean, how are you assessing that they are being more empathetic, more collaborative, or listening better, that they're taking more risks, being radical? How are you actually, you know, measuring those things and then, you know, putting it into their performance review?
Shall I?
Yes,
Can I take
yeah.
that? So I guess it's a difficult question to answer, because you kind of you set a preface of, but aside from performance review, how else are you? But at the moment, specifically, we've concentrated on the back of rolling out. So we launched it at a conference with our top 80 managers. On the back of that, we immediately started rolling out the LEAP programme and the workshops. And then by the end of last year, by the end of that year, it was formally part of the performance review process, by way of the competency framework. So we aren't specifically challenging people on Lumina Spark qualities in a performance review, but what we are doing is measuring them against all of those 12 competencies that are in the workbooks that were in the model. So that's formally become part of our performance review process now, and everybody is measured. They do a self-assessment and they take that to their performance review, and their manager will have already assessed them, and then they'll sit and have a conversation. And the idea all along with the framework was that not only was it a competency framework, but that the model itself enabled those kinds of performance conversations. So if a manager chooses to use Lumina as part of that conversation as well, because the individual is willing to share and talk it through, then that's great, and we definitely encourage that. But if they don't, the competencies are written in such a way that you'll see when you read through the book, the workbook that you've got, we've tried to write them in such a way that the language is familiar. So the competencies have been written around the same kind of language that are used to define the qualities in the Lumina portrait, and they can start to make the connection for themselves.
Is it 360 as well as the manager giving feedback? Or
Not yet.
Right. Okay.
Not yet, but we're kind of just trying to gradually introduce some of these concepts. We've done the senior management group that I originally started working with have done 360, but the whole management population, I guess to put this in context, is around 1,000 people collectively across the 3 divisions. We've rolled this out to 90% of those so far, and we've also then started rolling it out to the layer below that, project engineers and supervisors. So it's unfortunately, well, it's not unfortunate, but for the size of the organisation, we have to kind of do things in small chunks, manageable chunks. Okay, thank you. Yeah, there's a lady at the back. Sorry, we'll come to you, Nikita.
Becky, you mentioned actors and role plays. Could
Yes.
you tell a little bit more about who were those actors, or those managers, or did you invite somebody to play, and which situations you played through?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an external company called Role Players for Training, and they help us put together the scenarios, but with the help of the people who are actually in those roles. So the really important thing for our guys is that it feels relevant and it feels real. So, so when I was developing those scenarios, I would get somebody that's actually in the role, their manager, you know, role plays for training, get everyone together and start talking about, okay, what is a realistic scenario that we could have? And we tended to develop about 4 scenarios for one-to-one interaction, and then 1 forum scenario that would be relevant to everybody and, you know, to play as a group. So, so yeah, that's how we develop them. To make them really real is key. Yeah.
So we had a question just here.
The whole presentation was music to my heart in many different ways. And one of the things you mentioned is that you use Spark, emotion, and leader.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about, for example, in what situation would you use all 3? When would you use just Spark? When would you use just emotion?
Well, we don't use all 3 at the same time, although I think actually when John Crossan goes through in terms of talent identification, I think emotion and Spark are used together. And so for talent identification and the talent programs, we use both emotion and also leader actually. So it's mainly in the talent programs we would use all 3. And I think the leader part of it is almost an optional one to do the 360. So that's but John would be able to talk more about that in the panel. I don't want to take his thunder away. Bless him.
So people focused.
Any more questions? No?
Anne-Marie, yeah?
Oh, sorry.
One piece of advice for the group, I was thinking if you could give that, and is there anything you would have done differently looking back? So if you look back at the whole program, is there one bit of advice you think that's the gem, that's one thing to keep, one thing I would put in my program again? And is there something looking back you think if I was going to start again, I might have done this up front?
Yeah, I think the gem would probably, aside from Lumina, of course, would be the actors. I've never ever had such a great reaction to role plays than I have when I've used actors. It really did make a massive difference, from people dreading role play to people getting very excited about it and recommending the programme and asking for more. You know, I've never had that at all, so definitely I would do that again. Anything for you, Jen? What do you think?
In terms of things that I would do differently, I think that there was a number of things actually that we identified through the programme, and what we did have was the advantage of rolling it out in 3 divisions separately. So we were able to learn from the first division, make some changes and apply it to the second. What we didn't do genuinely, which we did the first time, so we rolled it out to managers, senior managers and managers, and we did pilot sessions and taster days and got everybody involved and enthused about it. And there was a spattering of people around the UK who had done it and started talking about it. And that kind of created the momentum. But when we rolled it out to supervisor level, for whatever reason, I guess because we'd already had great success with managers, we didn't do that. We didn't do any taster sessions. We didn't do a pilot. We just made some changes, wrote new scenarios for the actors so that they were relevant to the supervisory level, and then we just went ahead and rolled it out. And I was involved in delivering some of the sessions, and on reflection, I think maybe we could have done more. We made an assumption that the management level had sold the story for us, and the supervisors were already chomping at the bit. And in some cases they were, but in some cases they weren't. And that particular community actually was much more difficult to sell it to and to bring on board than I anticipated, if I'm honest. And we didn't have quite the same enthusiasm and energy about it as we did with managers. So I think, in hindsight, I would have tried to anticipate that a bit more and done more to engage the supervisor population separately. Are we done? Okay, good. Okay, well, I would first of all like to thank Stuart and everybody in Lumina Learning for giving us an opportunity to share. I think it's great to do this and to be in an audience and hear these kinds of things and learn from each other. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much.